So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. You're probably here because you can see the potential of AI and Copilot in particular to change the way we work. The reality is that employees are already using generative AI every day, but many organizations are still in pilot mode. And the use of managed bring your own AI can create real risks around security, confidentiality, and control. At the same time, the opportunity is clear: faster first drafts, time saved, better quality outputs, and less pressure on busy teams. In today's session, we'll focus on how Copilot can save executives and leaders time, and we'll look at practical features across Outlook, Word, Excel, and Teams. And I'm going to introduce a new feature called Copilot Notes. Please add any questions into the chat as we go, and we'll do our best to pick them up at the end. So I'm Johnny, I'm the sales manager here at Enhanced, and I'll be hosting today's session. And today I'm joined by James, our CEO, and later we'll discuss what AI means from an executive and leadership perspective. For anyone not familiar with Enhanced, we're a Microsoft-focused managed IT service provider based in Poole. We are employee-owned, and we support organizations with outsourced IT, cybersecurity services, Microsoft finance systems, and practical Copilot expertise. So, what is Copilot for Microsoft 365? As I'm sure you are all aware, Copilot is an AI-powered productivity tool from Microsoft, designed to help you work more effectively across Microsoft 365 apps. It's like having a personal assistant that helps you get things done faster and smarter. And something a lot of people I speak with don't realize is that Copilot uses broadly the same large language model as ChatGPT. And for those of you who are familiar with Claude from a company called Anthropic, that some believe is winning the AI race, soon you'll be able to use Claude in Copilot too. However, Claude is disabled by default and needs to be switched on by your IT team. This is because enabling it may mean your data leaves the UK. So I thought it might help to clear up some of the confusion around the different flavors of Copilot. So first, there's a free version. This is what you get when you sign in with your personal email account, your Hotmail, Gmail, that sort of thing. It helps with general web-based tasks, but it does not connect to your company environment, and your prompts may be used to train the large language model. Next, there's Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. This is the Copilot you get with your organization's Microsoft 365 subscription. In this version, you get business data protection, so prompts and responses stay protected, but it doesn't really have access to your work data unless you upload it. And finally, we have Microsoft 365 Copilot Business. This is the paid Copilot subscription, which goes further by connecting to your company data in Microsoft 365, by which I mean Copilot is deeply connected to and grounded in everything you're doing at work. It has access to your emails, everything you're doing in Teams, and all your documents in SharePoint and OneDrive. And this is collectively called Work IQ. So think of Copilot for Business as bringing AI to your work rather than taking your work, your confidential documents, to a service like ChatGPT. What does it cost? Well, that depends. Copilot Business for firms with less than 300 users is actually on promo at the moment at a cost of around £165 per user per year. The promo was actually supposed to end this month, so June. However, on a recent call with Microsoft, we were told this is going to be extended. We weren't told for how long for, but after that, it will probably go up to around £193 per user per month. However, if you're an organization with over 300 Copilot users, then I'm afraid you'll need the enterprise plan, which is around £277 per user. And costs increase further if you choose to pay monthly. So today I'm focusing on Copilot in Microsoft 365 apps. I'm not going to talk about agents, as we've been covering those in other webinars in this series. But just know that you can also build powerful agents with Copilot to automate simpler tasks in your business. And you'll also find Copilot in other Microsoft products, such as Dynamics CRM and their Business Central finance systems. So before I show you Copilot in action, a quick note on prompting. Understanding how to communicate effectively with Copilot is the key to unlocking its full potential. An effective prompt can significantly impact the quality of the results you receive. Copilot is designed to understand and generate human-like text, but the real magic happens when you know how to guide it. So this slide shows the 4 ingredients of a strong prompt: goal, audience, context, and format. Goal is the task, context explains the situation, audience tells Copilot who it is for, and format shapes the output. A good prompt doesn't necessarily need to be longer, just clearer. I would treat Copilot like an employee. Don't just give it the what, give it the why, the who, and the how. Right, let's get started with some practical examples, starting with Copilot Chat. So Copilot Chat, which you can find at copilot.microsoft.com, is the main web-based interface for Copilot. This is where I start when I'm researching or brainstorming. If you're signed in with a work and not a personal account, you'll see the Enterprise Data Protection green tick in the top right, which means your data is encrypted and is not used to train the large language model. If you have the paid version of Copilot, you'll see there are two icons at the top, Work and Web. Work searches your company data, your emails, your files, your Teams meetings. It will also search the internet. I typically start here unless I explicitly don't want its output to reference company data. And then Web searches the internet, public information only. Think work, internal, web, external. So I'll give you an example. In work, I asked it to tell me when I'm speaking at the Bournemouth Law Society AGM and remind me of the brief. You'll see it's pulled the meeting date from my calendar and provided some additional detail that it's got from my emails and some helpful suggestions on what to cover. And then in web, I'm going to ask it to help me to research new features of Copilot for Microsoft 365, just to make sure the content I deliver is up to date. And it's generated lots of helpful ideas and links. Again, Copilot Chat is the place to start when you're researching outside of your Office apps. Next up, Copilot in Outlook. So in Outlook, I use Copilot to summarize and draft emails and to prepare for meetings. So summarizing, imagine you're back from holiday, catching up on your emails, and you need to catch up on a long email conversation you missed. So here's a good example. The managers at Enhanced are brainstorming next year's business objectives. Rather than read the chain from start to finish, I can simply click Summary by Copilot and save myself a bunch of time with a brief bullet-pointed summary of everyone's ideas. Drafting. So next, let's look at how Copilot can help you draft an email. So James has asked me to work with our marketing team to relaunch our new managed security dashboards. So I'm going to ask Copilot to draft a communication to clients. And it's suggested a draft I'm relatively happy with, but I'd like it to be more concise. So I'll ask Copilot to make it a little shorter. And I'm happy with that, so I'll probably tweak it a little and send it. This is just an example of how Copilot can help you save time drafting emails. So next up, Copilot in Word. So I use Copilot in Word to help me summarize, draft, edit, and refine documents. So imagine you're reviewing the minutes from the last board meeting. The notes are long, rambling, and somewhat unstructured, not to mention some sarcastic undertones from the person taking the minutes. To save time, we'll ask Copilot to summarize this document, focusing on key decisions, risks, and actions. And you'll see it's given us a summary under the three headings that we asked for: key decisions, key risks, key actions, all with easy to read bullet points and an overall takeaway at the end. And it suggested a few ideas for what we do next. So let's create a one-page executive summary. And you'll see it's added a one-page summary of what was a 10-page document. And again, it's making a few suggestions as to what we do next. So let's create a board-ready decisions, risks, and actions table. And there we have it. Obviously, we can keep going with this, but I think you get the idea. Copilot has turned what could have taken a couple of hours to complete into a 2-minute job. Next, Copilot in Excel. It can help you analyze data, generate charts, and create reports. So here we have a fictitious cash flow spreadsheet. It's not ours, with a few thousand rows of data. So I'm going to ask Copilot to summarize the overall financial performance in this data set. So you'll see it's inserted a financial performance summary table into the spreadsheet, along with a short text summary and a helpful category breakdown. Next, let's try asking Copilot to create a chart showing cash in versus cash out over time. Now, as you'll see, it hasn't done a great job of this, perhaps because my prompt was a bit vague. So let's give it some feedback and ask it to make the chart easier to read. And it's given me a few suggestions, but let's go with summarize by month and rebuild the chart. And that's better, isn't it? But I've made a bit of a mess by dumping all of this data onto one sheet. So let's ask Copilot to move the data, the chart, and the summary to different sheets. So the data looks okay. So does the summary. But for some reason, the chart's broken. So let's ask Copilot to fix it. There we go, all sorted. Again, this is just another example of how Copilot can save us a lot of time. And if something does go wrong, simply ask Copilot to fix it. Copilot in Teams. So Copilot in Teams can help you streamline your communication and collaboration. And features include meeting preparation, summarizing Teams chats, meeting transcription, and intelligent recap. So Copilot can take meeting notes for you. You can enable this by clicking more at the start of the meeting and choosing Start Transcription. Here you can see a short meeting between myself and a colleague. And you'll see that Teams is transcribing the meeting. And this enables you to stay fully focused on the meeting, safe in the knowledge that Copilot will take notes. So after the meeting, Copilot will generate and send a summary of the conversation, and this is called Intelligent Recap. The summary will include meeting notes and follow-up tasks and who those actions sit with. It will also include a full transcription of the meeting, so no more hastily written meeting notes and missed actions. Right, Copilot Notebook. So this is a brand new feature from Microsoft. Think of a Copilot notebook as a focused workspace where you pull together the right files, notes, and links so Copilot can work from that specific set of material instead of the wider sprawl of your content. It helps keep everything in the right context, so summaries, drafting, and pulling together ideas are more accurate and useful for a particular task or project. Now, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but I've had a go at using Copilot Copilot notebooks for a legal scenario. So imagine, if you can, you're a junior solicitor who's been asked to get up to speed on a case quickly and put together a brief for a senior partner. Instead of spending hours reading every case note from start to finish, we're going to upload all of the case files into a Copilot notebook. So you can find Copilot notebooks in the Copilot chat that we talked about earlier by clicking on the dots in the top left and selecting notebooks. I've already created a notebook here and uploaded our case pack, a set of fictitious documents, contracts, emails, an expert report, witness statements, and so on. You'll notice that even before I ask anything, it's already given me a summary, some key insights. But let's ask Copilot to summarize this case in plain English for a newly instructed junior solicitor, including the key facts, issues, evidence, and current risks. So a junior solicitor would probably, I presume, spend most of the morning working out what the case is actually about, and this has done that in seconds. So next, let's ask Copilot which documents are the most damaging to the defendant on liability and what evidence do they contain? So instead of reading everything, you go straight to the documents that actually matter. And finally, we'll ask it to draft a short email to the supervising partner, summarizing the summarizing the case, the key risks, and recommended next steps before mediation. And that's the kind of email a junior, I would presume, usually be expected to produce after spending the day on the file. And we've done it in just a few minutes. Now, of course, you wouldn't rely on AI to advise on legal disputes without proper oversight, but it does seem likely, to me at least, that this could save solicitors a considerable amount of time. And obviously, law is not the only use case for Copilot notebooks. And finally, if reading's not really your thing, Copilot can also generate an audio overview. So you can tweak things like the tone and the length, and it ends up feeling a bit like a podcast. And I guess you could use it to save time by listening to it in the car on the way to a meeting. So next, no session on Copilot or AI would be complete without talking about data privacy, everyone's favorite subject. Microsoft is deeply committed to protecting customer data and ensuring privacy. Their approach is built on the principles of giving you control over your data, knowing where it is located, how it is used, and securing your data, defending it from unauthorized access. So Copilot for 365 ensures data security by keeping customer data within the Microsoft 365 service boundary and encrypting it during transit. It also respects role-based access controls, conditional access policies, and multi-factor authentication to ensure only authorized users can access the data. Essentially, a user's Copilot will only have access to that data the user has access to. Implementing Copilot isn't risk-free, however. For example, imagine an organization has recently migrated its services to Microsoft 365, but during the migration, the organization did not properly configure access controls and permissions for its employees. And as a result, an employee who should have only had access to general company information was inadvertently given access to sensitive financial data. Without Copilot, the user may never have come across this data, but with Copilot, the user might inadvertently include sensitive information within Copilot-generated content. This could lead to a data breach, causing significant harm to an organization's reputation and finances. Therefore, it's important that your data is properly structured and access controls are in place. So Microsoft Purview, so this is the foundation for secure Copilot adoption. It gives organizations a clear framework across 3 pillars. First, data security protects sensitive information and reduces oversharing through labels, encryption, and policy controls. Second, data governance helps organizations discover, classify, and understand the data Copilot can access. So responses are grounded in trusted information. And third, risk and compliance helps investigate issues, manage insider risk, and meet regulatory obligations as AI use expands. Together, these 3 pillars help organizations deploy Copilot with confidence. Again, depending on how you're licensed, Purview typically comes at an extra cost, but you might want to discuss this with your IT teams or us if that's us looking after it for you. So now we've covered the basics, let's look at this from an executive perspective. So I'm pleased to introduce James, who will join us for a short interview on what leaders are asking about AI, where he sees the biggest opportunities, and what organizations need to have in place to adopt it responsibly. James, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Johnny. Good morning, everyone.
So James, let's start with the bigger picture. AI has been around as a concept for a long time, and at Enhance, we've been using Copilot for a couple of years now, obviously. But from your perspective, why has AI and Copilot specifically suddenly become such a priority for leaders?
I think leaders are starting to see the tangible outcomes you can get from using AI, faster decision making, lower operational costs, and freeing up their team's time to focus on high value activities. I think this is why AI has moved up the agenda so quickly. It's no longer about experimenting with a new technology. As you just said, AI has been around for quite a while now. I think the leaders are starting to see the clear value it can offer. I think the conversation has shifted. It's now become about leaders identifying how they best use AI in their business.
Fab, thanks. So let's build on that. So for many organizations, Copilots may still feel like an interesting innovation or a productivity experiment. At what point does it become something leaders can't afford to ignore?
I think once you see the impact that AI can have on a business, and you can see like if your competitors are starting to move faster because they've adopted AI, it no longer becomes a choice. I think it comes a question of competitive advantage. If you don't keep up, you run the risk of being left behind your competitors, and I think that's something that all of us would be very concerned about.
Yeah, fair enough. So a lot of leaders are already busy and stretched, and I think the value of Copilot is not just in doing more, it's about helping them focus on the right things. So what is one thing leaders should stop doing themselves once they have Copilot?
I think the biggest gain I've seen personally is freeing up time from sort of what I would define as low value work. So I think you've talked about some of the things you can do with Copilot that will save time, such as drafting and summarizing emails, pulling information together, and that just saves a massive amount of time, and that just gives you the opportunity to focus on high value activities or high impact activities. So those would be things like applying judgment, making decisions, and setting the strategic direction for your business.
Okay, great, thank you. So security and data are always important, especially when AI is working across business information. How should leaders think about data, permissions, and security when they're considering Copilot? What should they have in place before they scale adoption?
I think to start off with, I think there's some common misconceptions about Copilot and AI more generally that introduces the data security risk. Copilot actually just exposes sort of probably the existing shortcomings on your data. So essentially, as you mentioned earlier on, when you're using Copilot, it has access to the data under the context of the person whose data it is. If data is overshared or poorly governed, Copilot will surface that content more quickly. So essentially, it will expose the risk that you've already got. So my advice would be that before using Copilot at scale, business leaders take this opportunity to sort of use this as a catalyst to review your data security and ensure you've got the right governance and controls in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about individual productivity, but I'd like to widen that to the organization as a whole. So as AI agents become more capable, what impact could they have on how a business scales, particularly in terms of capacity, consistency, and speed?
Yeah, we talked quite a lot about things like it helping write emails, helping summarize documents, and those sort of things. I think we haven't talked about this a lot today, but I think the biggest opportunity with AI is how you can sort of redesign and automate your workflows, remove steps in some of your processes, and sort of reallocate effort to what I've talked about already in terms of higher value work. All of these things really help you scale your business because essentially you can save so much time. Whereas before you'd have been looking at having to add additional costs into the business or potentially more complexity in order to grow. AI just takes away a lot of that and just sort of redefines the way you look at scaling a business.
Yeah, so agents. Fab. So finally, let's look ahead. If AI becomes a normal part of how teams operate, leadership will probably need to change as well. So how do you see leadership roles changing over the next few years because of AI?
I think, as I said, leaders can free up a lot more time. So that will allow you to focus your time in other areas, which might mean that the skill sets that a leader needs to have may change a little bit as well. So to share some examples, as I said, you can spend more time on your decisions, you can reinvest that time into your people and culture, and you can focus on growing your business, not just running it. I think especially in SMEs, leaders need to understand the value and the benefits of AI, as they'll need to be the ones that direct how it's used. We're also starting to see recruiters across a number of sectors looking for AI skills at a leadership level. So I see this as probably something that leaders can't ignore going forwards.
Okay, fab. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found it useful. And thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Try and stay cool. Yeah, see you on the next one.